I'm a yoga teacher. I live in Boston. I teach yoga in Boston. I began my yoga practice in England in the early 70s and have been doing it ever since. I practiced for a few years and then realized that my job was getting in the way of my yoga, so I quit my job and have been doing yoga ever since. I teach hatha yoga. Yoga is, it's a discipline thousands of years old, and it's considered to have many limbs, and one of those limbs, it's considered to have 8 limbs, and one of those limbs is hatha yoga, which incorporates the physical exercise component of yoga, and that's what I teach. But of course, yoga is never just about the physical component. There's always more. It's always about the body-mind connection. But that's my specialty, is teaching hatha yoga. Well, you do. Yeah, I think typically people come to yoga either for the hatha yoga, the exercise. That's what most people are doing. You know, when you sign up to take a yoga class at your health club, you're getting hatha yoga. But then there are also people who are drawn to the more spiritual aspect of the yoga practice and who might seek out studying at an ashram or some other spiritual center and might never practice the hatha yoga at all. And then if you love yoga, what typically happens is you do the exercises, and if you have a good teacher, that teacher is having you focus on your breathing, including some meditative qualities, because hatha yoga is a moving meditation. It's a misconception that to meditate you have to sit still, and it's a moving meditation. And so people will naturally, and I actually think this is the best way, are naturally going to be attracted to studying a little bit of the philosophy, and that incorporates the traditional 8 limbs. I started practicing yoga because I'd always been very athletic when I was in my youth and danced. And then when I went to college, I pretty much stopped all movement and basically either studied or partied, one of the two. And there was a point where I actually think that I'm blessed that I did enjoy movement when I was younger, because just the pleasure of moving kind of called to me and said, come on, you want to move again. I didn't originally want to take a yoga class because I had my own preconceptions about what yoga was. And I thought it was going to be pretty much sort of a foreign religion that I wasn't interested in exploring. But luckily, the only exercise class near where I was living in England while my husband was working on his doctorate, the only exercise class offered was yoga. And I had a wonderful teacher. And she, I think she immediately saw some sort of promise in me and took me under her wing. And so I started teaching about a year later, which in hindsight is silly because I didn't know anything. But I didn't know what I didn't know. And I learned on the fly, so to speak, and now these 30 years later, I'm still doing it. There was a point where I would say 12 to 13 years into practicing yoga and really being very thrilled by just feeling physically I was alive again, physically I was taking care of myself again, that I began to question, was this the extent that I could get from yoga? Because yoga is a wonderful thing. It won't stay inside the box. I think you can say, I'm going to do my yoga in the gym, and all I care about is being fit. But yoga sneaks up on you because it does tap, and this is the mystery of it. I love the mystery of it. It taps someplace inside yourself. And so I found myself being attracted to studying with teachers who were a little bit more focused on the breathing aspect, the movement of energy within the body, beginning to actually believe that there was this energy within the body. And I started to meditate, which is something I'd never done, even in all those years of doing hatha yoga. And so then as a teacher, I started incorporating more of that into how I taught. And it's a process. I'm still evolving. I hope I continue to forever. What's interesting to me is, and perhaps this is more, I was drawn to the physical because I was looking for some physical sense of well-being, and I didn't have big questions. I've always been a happy person, just have been, and very content. But I've also been always very interested in world religion and the spiritual side of things. And there was a point, and I really believe for me it was the breath, that when I had a wonderful teacher, his name is Angela Farmer, who started to direct me to look inside. And it really drew me into a vast inner place that I didn't know existed. Or I suppose I did know it existed, but I wasn't conscious of it, and realized that even though I was a relatively content person to begin with, that this was something I could hone. I could take this and I could expand upon it. And that I could also guide other people, even people who think they just want to be able to bend over without their back hurting. And you can, if you just turn people in the direction of their breathing and give them ways of focusing inside, it's all there. It's in everybody. It's in everybody. So you just need to turn people towards it, and then they see it for themselves. Yes, very much so. And the physical only takes you so far. And the being able to do a deep back bend or stand on your head for 15 minutes or any of these feats, physical feats, those things are going to go away. I think a big turning point for me was I became very ill. And when I became very ill, I realized that I was turning to these deeper places in my yoga for some healing. But beyond that, the physical side of it, it's great to be fit, and I'm grateful. I think it's yoga, hatha yoga's great stroke, and what makes it stand apart, and what makes it be unique is probably a better word. What makes yoga unique is that it so strongly brings in a physical component. And to me, I feel like it was the ancient yogis saying, transformation is a whole body process. And so you want your physical body to be as healthy as it can be. Having said that, that's only part of it. And so when you roll up your yoga mat at the end of the day and the physical poses are put aside for the day, the attention you've given to whatever you choose to give attention to, technique, breath, the flow of energy, the meditative stillness, all of those things, they stay with you. Someone isn't going to necessarily see that, oh, she can bend over very deeply, but they might be aware, even if it's in a very unconscious way, that there's someone who practices yoga in a very integrated way is more patient, willing to work through a process, willing to be, you can cultivate optimism. And I think that's a huge component of what you learn from practicing yoga. I was always a very healthy person. And, when you're healthy, you tend to take it for granted. And, of course, I was also very good at yoga. I was very lucky that I'm naturally limber and I'm also physically quite strong. So I took to doing these hatha yoga poses like a duck to water. And so, you go to a yoga class and you can do most of the yoga postures that the teacher is asking you to do. And it was actually on a long yoga retreat that I was staying in a house that flooded. And I didn't leave. I just, sort of stepped around the water. And I became quite ill, and I actually contracted viral pneumonia. I did nothing about it until I got back to the States sometime later and went to the doctor with a cough and felt I couldn't breathe very well, and they immediately hospitalized me. And I was sick and in and out of the hospital for about 5 years. I would say 4 or 5 times a year I'd be in the hospital. And then, and I was diagnosed with asthma, but it was very severe asthma that I could be fine most of the time, but when I started to have asthma symptoms, I could be in the hospital within 2-3 hours. It was very, very severe, very, very quickly, and so it threw me, it made me afraid because it could become so bad so quickly. I began to have a lot of doubt, and so I stopped traveling, and plus, it's a bit of a blow to a yoga teacher to not be able to breathe. So the old ego took a bit of a hit. But then I became very sick. They still don't know what it was. Some virus just got me, and I was actually on life support for 3 days. And when I came to in the hospital, realizing it was 3 days later in my life that I had tubes down my throat, I realized that my fear and my self-doubt that had come from not being able to have any sense of when this breathlessness would occur, that I had become too dependent on just going to the doctor and they would give me the typical medicines. And I said to myself, here I am on a breathing machine with as many drugs as allopathic medicine has to throw at me, and I'm not able to breathe on my own. And I really went at that point back to yoga and said, I know that through yoga I can recover my health. And I did, but it took 10 years. But I think yoga does build patience. You have the Yoga Sutra, which is the main text, philosophical sort of user's manual of yoga, says, this is the plan, and you just stay with the plan. And I just stayed with the plan, and I did a lot of experimenting. I asked a lot of people what they suggested I do, and I turned not away from allopathic medicine because it's a valuable piece, but I began to open up to other modalities and to see how I could get some help. And what really turned it around, I still have asthma, but I manage it with a combination of things. I do still carry an inhaler in my pocket. I still have that little fear in me, and I use other herbal remedies, but my primary management tool are some breathing exercises that I developed from looking at all these different ways of using breath to help asthma and working with the ones that really worked for me. And after about 10 years, all of a sudden, I realized that my episodes between having a severe attack were getting longer, and when I did have an episode, it was much less severe. I haven't been hospitalized in, I think 12 years. Yes. What's very frustrating when you become ill is a loss of control. And especially when it's an illness that is conceivably, potentially life-threatening, it does create a fear, and then I felt that fear made me dependent on the doctors, physicians, people I would go to see to help me out. And many of these physicians were really, really wonderful people and continue to be. And I still have a great relationship with my own medical doctor and a wonderful pulmonologist. But there was a point where, when I was really, really sick, that I realized that wasn't doing it for me, and that I needed to find something else. But I think that that's a difficult decision to come to really decide that you're going to take a chance and see what else is out there. Because part of the process of when you go in, I would go in, typically because, as I've mentioned, I would become very sick very, very quickly. Sometimes it was in less than an hour. The time when I was hospitalized and ended up on life support, it was less than an hour. And I was just suddenly not able to breathe. It makes us very afraid, or it made me very afraid. So I would be afraid to try something else, afraid to try to take less of the medicine. I was afraid. And that fear is, I think it is actually fostered in an unconscious way. I remember one time while waiting to see a doctor in an emergency room, seeing my chart. And on the chart, there was a note that said, first it had a flag on it. And someone later told me that this is a flag that when a doctor comes into the examining room, that cues them right away that it's a difficult patient. That was me. And there was a note. That's because I opened it up. I suppose you're not supposed to open up your charts, but I did. I wanted to see what it said, and it said, if this woman would simply take her medication, she would be so much easier to deal with. And I questioned, the emergency room staff had given me so many shots of epinephrine that I was afraid that my heart was going to burst. My heart was just beating out of my chest. I was afraid I was going to have a heart attack. And they were just, don't question us. But I couldn't help but question them. I was I can't breathe, but I'm going to have a heart attack. So that was where it would be frustrating, that so many of the people you would see were actually not seeing me. They were just seeing, oh, here's somebody else with asthma. Some of the education I got was first and foremost that despite various clinicians' skill, it was we each learn within of what is really a very narrow scope. For instance, I know yoga. I know a lot about yoga, but there are lots of other things that are even within the yoga tradition that I don't know so much about. But I realized that for me to get well, or to be able to manage, and actually maybe I should define wellness from what my perspective, having come out of being quite ill, is that to be well and to be healed doesn't always mean that you no longer have the disease, because I do still have asthma. But I consider myself to be a well person, and I'm healed from the energy that I had emotionally around being so sick, because it wasn't just controlling my breathing; it was also my mask. We all have masks, and my mask was, I'm a strong and healthy person, and yet sometimes I could barely function. So part of my education was to be real and to take the mask off. After I was so very sick, and my students were unbelievably nurturing and supportive to me, that was a huge wake-up for me to realize that I thought that I had to always be a sort of their yoga mom. I needed to teach them, I needed to guide them, I needed to project a persona of what they expect to see in a yoga teacher. And when I was really, really sick, they were so amazing, so amazing. They, because I had, as I mentioned, I was sick and in the hospital within an hour. And I didn't show up for a class on on Tuesday evening. I didn't show up the next night. I didn't show up the Thursday morning. Every single one of these groups of students coming in for class knew something was wrong because I wasn't there. And they all independently found me. They all found me and all wanted to know what they could do. Now, I was completely unconscious, so it was my family they were speaking to. What can we do? And food and helping my mother and doing all of these things. So I learned that I had a family and that that my yoga students and my yoga community was truly a community, and that when I fell, their hands were there to catch me, and it was a wonderful thing. And I was able to then admit, which often I wouldn't do, that I wasn't able to breathe well when I was wheezing. I learned that if I was not feeling well, it was okay to say, I'm not feeling well and I'm not going to teach today. And I realized that I needed to take care of myself. So I started making sure I got enough sleep. I'm a real fuss budget about I need my 8 hours. I'd get my sleep. If I'm not feeling so well, I take care of myself. And then I started to explore. I think my first foray into something other than allopathic medicine and some basic yoga breathing techniques that didn't really work for me very well was acupuncture. And this fabulous acupuncturist was able to use needles and stop an asthma attack. And that was a very interesting thing to observe, that she could do a few needles, a little moxa, and boom, my asthma attack was gone. But it didn't stay gone. But I knew that that was an outlet for me. A huge turning point for me was meeting an incredible osteopath named Tom Shaver, who I went to him because I'm also a cyclist, and I had a bike crash and broke my wrist. And he agreed to do some work on my wrist. And I said, well, what about, he was at a yoga retreat I was teaching, and he came up to me and said, I would like to work on your wrist. And I said, I can deal with my wrist. How about you looking at my asthma? And he did some amazing cranial sacral work on me that I felt was a huge turning point. And I was able, that was about, I'd say, 8 months after I was so sick in the hospital. And I was still on very heavy doses of some medications. And within 2 weeks, I was off those meds. It was amazing. It was amazing. So I was very impressed. And what was very impressive about both acupuncture and the work that Tom Shaver did was that I felt they were manipulating energy. And that then made me realize that energy is real, very real. And it is, I think of it as like the blood flowing through the body. There are veins of energy, and it's completely real. And then I started to take the breath more seriously because I had done some basic yoga breathing techniques. It's called pranayama, and they didn't work for me very well at the time. And in hindsight, I realized it was because my breathing was so dysregulated that, I don't know if that's a word, my breathing was so disturbed just on an everyday basis. I'd actually lost any sense of what just normal breathing was. So instead of trying to use these yogic breathing techniques to put an overlay of some, tried and true and skillful technique, instead I decided I would mimic what someone who breathes completely freely breathes like. So I started watching children and babies and people that I felt, my own students in class, when they were lying in deep relaxation at the end of class and breathing easily, looking at when they're breathing very easily, what does it look like? I'd watch their chest, I'd watch their belly, I'd look at the ratios of how long are they breathing in, how long are they breathing out, and realized that I didn't breathe when I was just feeling like I was breathing fine. I had no asthma. I didn't breathe like that at all. I'd lost that ability. And I think it's one of the mysteries of asthma, that your body loses a memory of what it's like to breathe normally. So I basically mimicked that fake it till you make it technique, and that's what did it for me. And I've gradually reincorporated some of the yoga pranayama techniques, but not a lot of them, because I feel for me personally, my work is to breathe just a normal, relaxed breath. And I don't think it's just asthma. I think, and this is one of the brilliant things about asthma, this is one of the brilliant things about Hatha yoga and yoga in general, is that asthma is triggered and exacerbated by stress, but a lot of other common problems, headaches, digestion, insomnia, the list could go on and on. They are triggered by stress. I teach, all the time and talk to people all the time, and I find that more and more people are coming to yoga to find a way of being quiet within themselves, or finding the space inside our lives, our world. I don't know anyone, all my friends who are yoga teachers, our most common complaint is, I don't have any time. I don't have any time. And so one of the things that's changed for me from my own being forced to sit down and rest when I need to rest is the realization that, number one, there is tremendous value in the space. There was a pianist who named Arthur Schnabel, and he said, I don't play the notes any better than any other pianists, but it's what I do with the space between the notes that causes me to stand out. That's a paraphrase, but something along those lines, that it's the space. And we need to remind ourselves we're running as fast as we can. Everything is on fast forward. That's the common way of looking at things. And in some way, we have made that in our culture a goal to strive toward, but it's making us sick. It's making us sick. A very good friend of mine works with executives, high-level executives all over the country, and he works with them to help them manage, he works with them to help them manage their businesses better, CEOs, presidents of companies. And he said that the number one request he gets from his clients is, can he give them the skill to quieten their mind, that there's never any room. They're always thinking, planning. They can't sleep. They have no space. So he's begun using yoga techniques, meditation techniques, and I think that people are wanting to do this, and they think they don't have the time to do it, that I'm going to lose my place in line if I back off, if I walk away from this. But there's so many ways of finding some tools that can help you out. And I think this is where yoga and meditation and many, many other different modalities, that I would feel that I'm just part of a huge community of people I don't really know who are leading sort of parallel lives where they found other methodologies of healing from different cultures, realizing that it's not about, you don't have to give everything up. It's about making choices about what really matters, keeping the things that are important, and letting go of things that you really cannot handle anyway. Just an example that I look at is waiting for a plane. When you're at the airport, if the plane's going to be late, you can either stress, yell, be all upset. The plane is still going to be late. Or you can say, well, the plane's going to be late. I have a book in my bag. You can still wish the plane was going to be on time, but since it's not going to be on time, read a book. That's what I do when I have to go to the doctor. I never go without putting a book in my bag because I always look upon it as 15 minutes, 20 minutes here of time when I'm going to be able to read. Or I'll sit there and stress and fret and go, where is that doctor? But instead, I'll look upon it. So that's the optimism of being able to look at, I can't change this situation, so what can I do to make the most of this situation? And that's what people can absolutely do. And yoga is great for this because I really consider yoga to be behavioral medicine. It changes your actual behavior of how you respond to situations, how you feel within yourself. You can if I quote Angela Farmer again, someone asked her at one point, isn't it stressful for you to not have a home? Because she basically travels all the time. And she just looked at them and held her hand to her heart and she said, I am home. And I really realized she was saying she was at home within herself. And which doesn't mean that travel isn't stressful, but when you've practiced, and yoga is just one way. It's the way that speaks to me the most because of the physical component. I do love that, and it does inspire me. But that's just one way of finding that place within yourself. And to me, inclusionary medicine has that part to it. It has one part of, yes, you've come to me with a problem. You've got asthma. You've got migraine headaches, whatever it is. And you come and you're looking, how can I help you? But within that is to say, with what's within this, whatever the problem is, where am I going to be able to actually reconnect to my true self? In yoga, it's called the true self. And when you connect to your true self, the problems of your life and the world do not go away, but you see them you see the big picture within it. And to me, that is a huge piece that I think that anyone who is looking for some healing can, even if we don't know we're asking for it, that we're looking for that. I think that when a student comes to a yoga class, they may think they're coming because they want to fix their bad back. But somewhere in their subconscious, they're choosing yoga because they know there is that quest for the true self as well. That's a part of it. In yoga, there are various precepts, and one of those is santosha, and that means contentment. And that's always been very important to me. I love contentment, which is santosha, and aparigraha, which is traditionally translated to mean don't be greedy. And to me, I prefer to translate it as lead a simple life. And to me, that's what health is finding contentment in your circumstances, which doesn't mean that you don't strive to make changes, that you don't strive to grow and evolve. But to me, health is physical and emotional and spiritual. And yoga, my field of expertise, has lasted, in my opinion, as long as it has, which is at least 2,000 years, has lasted as long as it has, because for all that time, yoga has taught that health is a physical, emotional, and spiritual tradition. And if it was just one, it would have gone into the dust like so many other ancient traditions have. But the traditions that last, I feel, are the ones that have, all those years ago, recognized the body-mind connection And we have, with all our science and all our research and all our education and technology, have somehow lost that. Or we think we've lost that. We don't. There's, I can say that better. For all our technology and all our education and all our research and accomplishments, we have lost touch with an integral part of humanity, and that is that true health comes from finding contentment and simplicity within ourselves in whatever form that takes. Again, it doesn't mean you have to, you can still have a nice house, you can still be a wealthy person, you can still have an accomplished life within our modern world, but it's an inner place that you can call upon and revisit over and over again that is real health. And I find that the longer I practice yoga, which is going on to 35 years now, it's hard to believe, that the less interested I am in the physical practice, though I still do it very regularly, but the more intrigued I am by the way that the work with the breath, with the energy, with the nervous system impacts the way I live my life. Deciding what path to take for your own healing is extremely individual. When I was working to find some answers to my own asthma problems, I realized that me, the individual, and we are all our history. We are our life history, our body, our health, our physical health, our emotional health is really is our history. Sitting here, and when we go and see someone, first of all, do be willing to ask for help. That was hard for me to do. Be willing to ask for help and be willing to listen, and you'll find. I have faith that if we listen, we know on some intuitive level the who is going to help us the most. So, and this has happened for me, that I would go to see one person, say for acupuncture, and then she would say, "Oh, I think you might benefit from seeing so and so," and then I would go to that person, and then another person would send me to the next person. It would be great to be able to have an expert who is really well versed in all the different possibilities, because there are huge possibilities of ways of helping ourselves. And I'm sure I've only tapped a few of them through diet and through energy work that I did. I only tapped a few of them. And for working from knowing personality, knowing what's worked for various diseases, various ailments, and being able to steer people. I read somewhere that 75% of people with chronic illness on their own will seek out some sort of what is commonly called alternative medicine. And they're seeking out on their own, often in the dark, just sort of, oh, I've heard maybe this would be good. I've heard maybe that would be good. And so what I think what I feel as healthcare professionals, we do ourselves a service, and we do our clients a service, is to be informed. So that if I have a student in a yoga class, for example, who comes to me and says, I have such and such issue, I might be able to refer that person to someone that I feel might help them in a different way, and perhaps even in a better way than what yoga could do for them. I think that would be what, if healthcare professionals could really be more of a community where we're going to use the vast network of possibilities instead of just staying with, teach what you know, and what you don't know, then be able to refer people on to something else. Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, I already do that. To be able to speak to someone else, I will often call, usually I will admit within the yoga community, but I will call another yoga teacher, or I will call an osteopath. I have a good friend who's a marvelous chiropractor, and I will often call him and talk about a student who has come to me with some issues and wanting his advice, his opinion, his ideas about, or these other yoga teachers, their ideas about what they might suggest. Because we will only be more powerful and therefore ultimately more successful in helping bring people back to health if we all, the strength in number, basically. If we all work together, we improve our chances of coming up with a successful conclusion to any problem than if we try to do it all on our own. I think that yoga has a very important place within the whole healthcare profession. We can teach yoga. As a yoga teacher, I'm teaching yoga almost exclusively to students who come to yoga a couple of times a week or more often or less often. And bringing yoga into their lives is being used as preventive medicine. By practicing, they're staying physically fit. By doing breathing technique, meditation technique, they're helping to keep their body-mind healthy. But then yoga also has a very different application when something doesn't go as according to plan, when we do get sick. The way I used yoga when I realized that I had asthma is the yoga can be used very strategically to target a particular problem, so that if, for instance, there is something physical like lower back problems, you can use a particular sequence of yoga poses that are specifically designed to help alleviate the problem as well as prevent it from reoccurring. If someone has trouble sleeping, which is just a huge issue, if you can't sleep, it's so draining. And you can use a specific sequence of poses, not the same sequence for each individual. This again is seeing the person, not just the insomnia or just the lower back problem, but seeing the individual, working one-on-one to come up with a sequence of yoga poses that are therapeutically designed to help this particular problem. So yoga is both preventive as well as strategically therapeutic, depending on what you need. A lot of people don't realize that when you go to an acupuncturist, when you seek help from an Ayurvedic physician, that you are seeking help and going to someone who is practicing a tool, a school of medicine, it's true medicine that's thousands and thousands of years old. Chinese medicine is the oldest medicine on the planet. Ayurvedic medicine is thousands of years old. And to consider that Western medicine has covers all of what we have to offer is an immature viewpoint. We can, I think within the yoga profession, the Western yoga teachers have been, in fact, the Western yoga teachers have been very influential in studying how yoga can be used therapeutically and calling upon ancient practices that their antiquity is to our advantage. We are so lucky to be able to call upon traditions such as acupuncture and Chinese medicine that has tried and true tradition and success and is still practiced throughout the world for thousands of years. It's so powerful. Chinese medicine is so powerful and has a tremendous role in the West. So when we talk about medicine, I think as healthcare practitioners, we can help to inform people who come to us for help that there is a huge world of possibilities of extremely deeply researched and successful traditions of using yoga. And that even in the West, that just what we call Western medicine is really just allopathic medicine, but that there have been many people who have come, Dr. Andrew Weil, for example, a medical doctor who has taken his skills as a medical doctor within the allopathic tradition and has built upon that and made it something so much more. So people, as we explore more and more our possibilities, we will only benefit from looking outside the box of just Western allopathic medicine and seeing that there's so much more to that. As a yoga teacher, speaking to the question of the importance of language. Language is my primary teaching tool. I think language is huge as a yoga teacher to me, because the way we speak has tremendous influence. Rita Mae Brown says, words have an influence on us like the moon has influence on the tides. So the words we use move into people very, very deeply. I do find that sometimes within I'm searching for the right word here, within the inclusionary community, the alternative community, sometimes words we use are used almost gratuitously. There's nothing of depth or authenticity behind them. So we'll speak to energy or areas, the heart, without it having anything to chew on, anything substantial behind it. A really authentic healer, and the people that I have been most influenced by are the healers who, and even that word, healer as opposed to practitioner, the real healers are the ones who, despite of, not because of any skills that they've been trained at, are able to connect to the individual that they're healing or working to help heal themselves. Their words are coming from somewhere very deep inside them. So the way that we speak, the words that we use, and being very aware of not just giving throwaway words, because we feel, someone might want to hear that you are a wonderful person, or you are a beautiful person, or there are all these possibilities. There's truth to that, but we can throw these things out almost like you're sending a Hallmark card. We can just throw words out that haven't come from a one-on-one experience with the person that you're working with. And that's something that's very important to me, of really being careful that we don't just have these throwaway, feel-good phrases. Because something that I think is true is that when I'm working with a student, whether it's in a regular daily yoga class or if I'm working with them one-on-one, I work with people with asthma with yoga, is everyone deep inside their soul knows when they're being sold a bill of goods. And there are a lot of people out there who are, take this and this wonderful, and all these promises, all these things will come to you. And I think the true healers are very authentic and very honest, and very honest. And so when someone says to me that something that I think is very deep and coming from deep inside the soul, and using language that taps into the soul, then there's something that has a ring of truth to it. Because that's what language, Carl Jung said, that we use images and language to tap into the psyche. That's how we really connect to the inner world. Insight comes through language and image. We can tap into places that our thinking mind is not able to. You can get into a deep place inside, and because ultimately we all heal ourselves. The medicines we take, the yoga postures we do, the acupuncture needles are really just untangling something that's disorganized within ourselves. Hatha yoga is part of the tantric tradition of India, and it means expanding the web. And I always think of that as any problem we have is like a spider's web that has gotten tangled up, and we're using our skills to give the space back so that it becomes all untangled and much more organized. But if you look at a spider's web, it's organized in a very non-linear way, but there's this marvelous sense of organization to it. And to me, that's what yoga at its best is, and what healing at its best is to take a disorganization and give it space back. And so it doesn't matter what tool you're using. Again, yoga, acupuncture, it doesn't matter. It's something that's tapped into the individual and is just recovering the space. It's all a recovery process. The perfect health, the perfect true self is always there. It's just sometimes very well hidden, and we forget. And so all I am doing as a yoga teacher is trying to find language and movement that helps people remember. And that's all I do. And the language is huge, because the language can slide in. And that's why people love music. We all have our favorite songs where a lyric, some poem got to some place that you needed to get to at that time, and you never forget it. And that same song will mean nothing to someone else, or might even irritate someone else, but it changed your world. And that's what language can do when I'm teaching yoga, or I hope it does anyway. If you feel that, in speaking as how yoga is part of that coming, if as a yoga teacher I would, send people to other people, and then the larger viewpoint of healing as not being, that health is and healing are not just about getting well, but about finding that centered place inside. I think if we can see that, almost everyone I know who has been very sick has had that realization. Obviously you get a diagnosis of ill health, you're going to go and try to get well. Of course, we're going to do that. But almost everyone I know who has been really, really ill, and some people that I know who died of their illness, nonetheless came to a place of realizing through some magical process that health and healing are so much more than the physical body being healthy. It's an important part. Not feeling well is not fun, but being healthy and being well is much, much, much deeper. And I find that reassuring. if it all depended on being the picture of physical health at all times, then we're only open to disappointment. Healing is a sort of collaboration of technique and attitude. And technique actually does matter. It really does matter. And one thing I think that those of us like myself who were raised in the West, and when we think of, I'm sick, give me a pill. Bernie Siegel, when he was doing all his groundbreaking research with the influence of the mind over healing, he's an oncologist, said he was taken aback by how many people just said, can't you just give me a pill? Do I have to get involved in this process? And so we think it's sort of, I'm going to take a pill, and these researchers in the labs have come up with these amazing things that will help me get better. Many of our medicines, by the way, are all based on plant medicines that were gleaned from deep tribes, in tribes deep in the Amazon and other places, ancient medicines that have just been now created in a lab, but they're a lot older than that. So we think of then the more subtle and elusive techniques, say a yoga pose, or the place that an acupuncture needle is positioned, or the place that someone's finger pressure in shiatsu might be applied, or the subtle techniques that a good osteopath might use on manipulating your skull. That seems so vague. It seems so vague when we live in an empirical world, and so it's like, well, they can tell me, down to the molecule why this drug has this impact. But something as subtle as someone manipulating my skull, how can that possibly work? But those are techniques that are very, very potent. And in fact, anyone who's been trained in teaching yoga is cautioned by a good yoga teacher, don't underestimate the techniques, especially with the breathing work, because it is so powerful on the nervous system, so powerful on the energetic systems of the body, that because it is so subtle, we can underestimate its power. But it is extremely potent technique. And the best healers of any of these traditions have very, very good technique. They are real technicians. And I'm trying to think, Georg Feuerstein, he calls yoga the technology of ecstasy, I believe, using the word technology. So there is tremendous technique. That it's subtle shouldn't fool us into thinking that it's not powerful. But attitude is everything. And that's been proven over and over and over again through many clinical trials with placebo effect. So the attitude you have going in, that I am going to be able to do whatever it is, whatever your goal is. Sometimes your goal changes in midstream. Like with my yoga, I thought I just was going in to help my back that hurt. And here I am all these years later, largely trying to turn people inside to this vast energy world, inner landscape of consciousness. If you had said to me 35 years ago, that's what I would be doing, I said, absolutely not. I want nothing to do with that stuff. So, where you think you're going and where the road you actually get on sometimes are not the same. And usually they are not the same. But attitude is huge. And attitude can be created. People will say to me, I'm just a born pessimist, or that's just the way I am. Here's one thing I know from teaching yoga all these years. Nothing is just the way it is. Everything in life changes because we are nothing but energy. And energy is always changing, always moving. Anything can change. So when we can get out of that mindset that this is just the way I am, then, and that can be good or bad. My image was, I'm a strong person. I can do it all myself, until something inside knocked me down and said, "Think again, Barbara." And then I realized that there was just something incredible, and my life was so much better for realizing that it's actually nice to work within community. That I didn't try to keep this sort of island of, yoga teacher over here. That I was teaching and my students were teaching me, and that was so huge. And so, attitude can absolutely be shifted, and it's wonderful when I, as a yoga teacher, do it sort of stealthily, so that instead of going, you've got a bad attitude, you could change that. You sneak up on people and sort of sweet talk them into changing their attitude. And it works most of the time.